Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Future of Simulation. I am Marquita Celestin, Client Account and Business Development Manager in the Information and Publications Department here at the Nautical Institute. We are indeed delighted to be joined by an esteemed panel of speakers today, whom you will meet in just a few moments. We know many of you in attendance are already members of the Nautical Institute and our industry partners. But for those joining for the first time, I'd like to give a short overview about who we are and what we do. The Nautical Institute is an international professional body with members across the globe. Our aim is to promote professionalism, best practice, and safety throughout the maritime industry, and to represent the interests of our members. We do this in several ways, for example, via technical webinars, like this one that you're a part of today. We also do this through representation at international maritime bodies such as IMO. It is our belief that sharing information and best practices leads to improved decision making and promotes high standards. In today's webinar, our panel of experts will discuss the integration of innovative technologies into operational training, the role of simulation instructors, and the future of maritime simulation, all of which you'll learn more about, and you can find additional information in our simulation instructors manual, which you'll hear more about at the end of this webinar. It is now my pleasure to hand over today's proceedings to my colleague and our moderator for today's webinar, Professor Malik Kauzanjani.
Marquita, thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good morning and good evening, depending on where you are. As you heard, there are more than 700 people who've registered and are with us to this webinar on future of simulation. My name is Malik Kauzanjani, Fellow of the Nautical Institute and Head of Naval Education at MLA College, which is a partner with Nautical Institute, and those who want to take advantage of that partnership, they will get a discount from those programs that MLA College provides. For this session, we have 3 short presentations planned by Jillian, Carson-Jackson, Anthony Patterson, and Sam McClasser. I also have Captain Al Sayed, Senior Technical Advisor of Nautical Institute, with many years of experience in simulation, who would join me for the Q&A session after the presentations. Our first presentation is by Jillian Carson-Jackson, Fellow of the Nautical Institute, former President of Nautical Institute. She has in the past worked for the Canadian Coast Guard, International Association of Lighthouse Authorities, and a visiting professor toward Maritime University, and that is where we met more than 20 years ago. And then she joined the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, where we again met up a number of times. Jillian, congratulations on finishing the 2nd edition of the book. I enjoyed reading it, and I look forward to your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and greetings from Georgian Bay, Ontario. So good morning. I would like to start off with just a little bit of information about simulation instructional skills and why they're so critical in the work that we do. The simulator itself is a tool, and like any tool, we need to be able to use that tool effectively. Simulation then is the activity that we, as simulation instructors, design to make best use of that tool. Now, we need to design that to ensure that it meets carefully crafted objectives and that we can design those activities in a manner that makes best use of the tool. So the tool, the activity, and the instructor. In order to do all of those activities and design those within the objectives of the training, we need to know a bit about educational theory. Now, pedagogy means quite literally leading children. You've probably heard about the pedagogic approach to training or pedagogy. It has long been the focus of many training institutes. With the traditional focus on the classroom, pedagogy actually is a more teacher-centric approach. That means you have less autonomy, but a very clear structure. There's less opportunity for self-directed or learning-focused aspects. In andragogy, on the other hand, that means leading man, or as Malcolm Knowles has defined it, the art and science of teaching adults. This can be traced back to Plato, actually, who has been quoted as saying that we don't learn. What we call learning is actually a process of recollection. So if you take a look at andragogy, andragogy has a fair bit of structure still to it, but much more autonomy available. Hertagogy is a natural progression based on andragogy, where the more mature learners require less instructor support, but more opportunity, more autonomy to actually do that realization of levels, this realization level of continuous learning. What we can do to support that is through this concept of discovery learning. Discovery learning is a continuous cycle concept through development, application, exploration of whatever element that you're working on. Jean Piaget said, what we see changes what we know. What we know changes what we see. I want you to think about that just for a second. What we see changes what we know. And then what we know, we go back into that experience, it changes how we look at that experience, how we experience the next approach. Now, this fits very well with David Kolb's experiential learning cycle. The learning cycle is often represented in many different ways, but it always has at the core an experience, an opportunity for reflection, to think about that experience, to then generalize what happened in that experience and think about another application moving into a new experience. So this learning process really is having knowledge created through transformation of experience. So making the best use of that experience, which is why it fits so well in a simulator. It's the skills of the simulation instructor. Remember those definitions, the simulator, simulation, and simulation instructor. It's the skills of the simulator instructor that is used to create that sense of realism, to provide these experiences, and to guide the learner in an andragogical approach or through hertagogy to make best use of that experience in some discovery cycle. But in order to do that, we need to really know what it is we're doing. And that brings us to the importance of objectives. And something like a good understanding of is definitely not a good objective. What is good? And then how do you measure understanding? So the importance of objectives comes out. And actually writing a good objectives can sometimes take hours, even days. You go back and you look at it going, no, that's just not right. But every objective needs to have a performance. The what can be done. And that performance will then link to some sort of action verb, one of these training taxonomies. And they could be related to the cognitive, affective, psychomotor, or any combination of those, actually. Then you also have to think about the condition. How will it be done? Are there constraints? Is it in a simulated environment? Is there a time limit? And then you want to think about that standard. How well will it be done? What is the degree of accuracy? What are the parameters that you have within your operation? So every objective should have performance, condition, and standard. And that's really great. That gives you the good start of it. But then what you need to do is you need to pass that objective through that SMART filter. And in order for an objective to be SMART, you take what you've written with your performance, your standard, and your condition, and you say, is it specific? Is it measurable? Ideally, it should be measurable with that action verb. But is it measurable? Is it achievable or attainable? Is it realistic? Is it relevant? And is it time-bound? Because we can't give an unlimited amount of time, especially in a simulator, when you're designing your programs and you have to bring your students along. So the simulator objectives are so critical. And as a simulation instructor, you're making best use of that tool, the simulator, to devise those activities within the simulation. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to pass over to a short poll on what you think the skills are for a simulator instructor.
So if I could ask for the poll to be shown now, and I would like to get your thoughts on what are the skills that a simulator instructor should have. Do they need to be a technical expert, a skilled facilitator, excellent in their communication skills? Do they need those coaching skills, or a sound knowledge of educational theory, or any percentage of each of those? What you might want to do as well when we have the question and answer period with Slido is you could also provide us with some other thoughts on what you think are the skills for a simulation instructor. I'm looking at these now. We're looking at pretty cool coming in here. Skilled facilitator is pretty much at the top with some technical expertise. We've got that next one up. I think it's the coaching and the communication. They're almost neck and neck. Very, very cool there. Yeah, skilled facilitator. Really important to bring those students along all the time and to understand when to push and when to pull back. The joy of discovery learning. It is that Jean Piaget quote. I really love that quote because if you think about it, what you know changes what you see, and then what you see changes what you know. It's that whole cycle, and then you want to build on that. It looks like we're almost through our poll there now. We've got some pretty good ones. It looks like skilled facilitator definitely runs away with the field. Excellent communication skills and coaching skills, neck and neck. The next one up there is a technical expert and sound knowledge of educational theory. It's really interesting because to become a facilitator, you do need, it's almost assumed that you would also have that sound knowledge of educational theory. So that's fantastic. Thank you, everybody. And I think I should probably pass now back to Malik in order to introduce a very good friend and colleague of mine for many, many years. So over to you, Malik.
Jillian, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And if I could ask the participants to do pose their questions. I haven't seen anything as yet, but they will come. Jillian, I really enjoyed reading your book. Fantastic book. And I would say it is not only for simulator instructors, it really is for anyone who is involved in education. I really enjoyed reading it. Now, colleagues, our next speaker, presenter is Captain Tony Patterson, Associate Fellow of the Nautical Institute, Master Mariner, Marine Simulation Practitioner for the past 24 years, and Simulation Patent Holder. Currently employed by Virtual Marine as Managing Director, Training Division. He is the chair of the International Marine Simulation Forum, and he probably would tell us a little bit about that, and former officer in the Canadian Coast Guard, and currently a member of the Canadian delegation to the IMO. Tony, over to you, sir.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations to Jillian for the second edition of her book. Her first edition was fantastic, and when I read the second edition, I could see there's a lot of new things have come in from experiences that have happened over the years, and I think everyone should read this. So, keys to success: simulator instructors and instructional designers. I'm going to pick up on the last place of the poll and make the pitch on why instructional design is going to become extremely important for simulator instructors. And I'll give a little brief of what the IMSF at the end of the presentation. So number one is we're seeing a rapid expansion in the use of simulation being driven primarily through digital twinning efforts. Digital twins, in the background of digital twins, are a bunch of mathematical models and simulations about how real-world systems work to help collect data that's used then to improve the performance of these systems. And you're starting to see a whole lot of very powerful computers in very small packages jammed into every nook and cranny of the workplace. From Internet of Things, just about every piece of instrumentation or piping that you have has a computer sensor that's collecting data, even to things like the simulators themselves that would be used for training. What used to take 4 or 5 computers in a server rack can now be done in a gaming laptop. And what this is doing, it is creating an awful lot of data and data digital threads to get better understanding of how systems perform, including how humans perform in the system. And all of this is improving, the state of the art on how accurately a workplace and systems within the workplace can be modeled. Also, how one workplace would interact with another. Let's say one ship with another one, or a ship ashore. And the presentation of all of this information is being facilitated through better visualization techniques. That's virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, these sorts of things. And of course, simulation is now breaking free of the bounds of a particular location, because a lot of this data and these models are running on the cloud. I'm just going to give a quick narrative of the picture that you're seeing here. This is a lifeboat coxswain on board an FPSO that's doing a lifeboat drill. This is part of a digital twin. So the scenario that this person might be doing is, it could be rooted on the weather forecast of what the FPSO is going to experience in the next 5 days. So they're doing a little bit of advanced planning to say there's a storm coming. They're practicing for that. The performance data from this person is going back not only to assess their competence and give them feedback, but also to benchmark against coxswains with similar capabilities, as well as feeding systems on board the installation about the degree of readiness of people on board. And all of this is tied into all the data coming from all the sensors to give an overall risk profile for this operation. This is where simulation is going. This is moving very quickly, and we need to get ready for it. Next slide, please. So when we look at digital twins, we're coming into this concept, which it's experiential learning, which Jillian has talked about. But I'd like to pose another question. We've all heard about artificial intelligence. What about artificial experience? Can you learn how a real system works through the digital representation of that real world coming from these digital twins? The picture that you're seeing here is an example of that. This is an ice breaking simulator that was developed for the Canadian Coast Guard. It's on board a Canadian Navy warship. The person operating the controls had a 1-week training program ashore. The ship is sailing to the Arctic and about to enter the ice. And on the voyage up, all of the bridge officers and everybody that's involved in this operation are doing a series of simulations related to the ice conditions and the areas that they're likely to encounter over the next 2 weeks. And the idea being is that they've never been in ice before except on the simulator. Will they be able to transfer that knowledge as the ship actually comes into ice? For this to work, as Jillian talked about, the experiential learning, is you have to have the idea that you're actually in the situation. You have to have this idea of telepresence. That's the subjective feeling of being somewhere else. You have to also have immersion. For telepresence to work, you have to feel that you're there. That's immersion. That's driven by technology. What do you see? What do you hear? How do things feel in your hands? But more importantly, engagement. You have to buy into the situation that you're learning with. This is that concept of suspended disbelief, which really is a function of technique. If artificial experience is a thing, and experiential learning with simulators actually works, the benefit of this is that it's consistent, repeatable, accessible, and authentic. Authentic in the sense that it is realistic. What you've seen here are these two pictures. These are situations where there is no instructor. The entire simulation, the briefings and debriefings were designed ashore by instructional designers. So I have a poll question, if it could be put up for me, is how many people on the call have had the experience of developing simulation programs where they are not physically present when the scenarios are being delivered to the students, and they're not physically present to give the briefings or the debriefings. So we'll see. I'm kind of seeing it's like so far it's an 80-20 split, maybe a 3/4 1/4 split. And I'm actually not surprised. I think if we'd asked this question 5 years ago, it'd almost be nobody would have done it this way. But during the pandemic, I've talked to a lot of schools, and this is exactly the mode that they had to go into, because they had a disconnect between the instructors and the students, and they had to lean more on instructional design and having students get briefed and debriefed automatically using the simulators themselves. And I think as you talk with manufacturers are moving in this direction to enable these tools. And there we go. I think we got a 1/4, 3/4 split. We can go to the next slide. I would say if we ask this poll again in 2 years' time, it'll be more 50-50, because this definitely is the way that simulation is going. The next slide, when we come up to it, is engaging with the virtual environment. And this is really the core of Jillian's book, and I think this is why it's really important that we get it. Engaging with the virtual environment means that you have to get the students to psychologically buy into the learning experience. You have to avoid frustration and boredom. You can't have things too easy or too hard. There has to be multiple pathways to competence based on the needs of the learner. And it needs enhanced skills in instructors and instructional designers. Pay very close attention to what Jillian talks about with the creation of objectives and with hertagogy. Think about it this way, is that game designers for kids playing games, they put an enormous amount of design into their gameplay to make it enjoyable and happy, and where people will voluntarily do this sort of thing. And we need to do the same thing on the simulation side. And finally, the last slide is that the International Marine Simulator Forum has been around since 1978. Our objective has been to bring simulation into the maritime industry. We would encourage anybody who would like to join to go up on our website, imsf.org. And we're having a meeting in St. John's. There it is, MARSIM, October 22nd, 25th. We're going to talk about all things simulation, especially the use of simulation in STCW, a very topical topic. And over to you. Thank you very much.
Jody, thank you very much for that, for sharing with us the shape of the future. Yeah, the future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed between all of us. But thank you for sharing that. Now, our next presentation is by Captain Sandy Klaassen, Master Mariner and Product Sale Manager at Wärtsilä Voyage Europe. Unfortunately, he is not with us in person today. However, we do have a recording of his presentation that we're going to share with you.
Good day, everyone. This is Sander from Wärtsilä, Rotterdam, and welcome. Thank you for having me at this book release, the new edition of the Nautical Institute Simulator Instructor, edition number 2. Really excited, and thank you for having us. And in the next few slides, we will present in the next 10 minutes the Wärtsilä vision, and of course, related to the book release, how we complement the SOEM equipment manufacturer in the simulator industry, the new features and vision roadmaps that we will discuss with all you guys. Presenting here remotely, first topic here is on the training skills and the actions needed to drive decarbonization. We have seen that there are a lot of competency gaps and skills needed for the decarbonization, not only by us, but also by the DNV, of course, the reports that came out. What are these skills then? Looking at these competency skills, handling complex operations, especially for new technologies. So there we see a lot of the use for simulators coming in. In the use of virtual reality, augmented tools, mixed reality, but also, of course, on the existing physical simulators, the really models where it's about high fidelity training needed. So let's dig a bit deeper into blended learning and using the online courses and simulators. Navigating the future, how we do it at Wärtsilä simulation and training, and also for the R&D That's where we look at also with the e-learning. Decarbonization, you can really see that if we look at the market developments within the simulation industry, we're trying to, of course, to keep up with the latest tech and provide that to the industry by also being able to manage the competency supply chain in this way. So what we do, we have different entities within our large corporation like Marine, Wärtsilä, Land and Sea Academies, and that's where we try to combine with a lot of new regulations coming in to combine that knowledge and bring that towards the industry. Decarbonization, digitalization, what we said, a large challenge for the maritime industry, also to maintain the crew and to keep them updated on the latest technologies. With legislation changing and the future for maritime learning path to be developed and to make sure it complies to the latest standards, a lot of industry input is needed. Yeah, high quality and blended learning, efficient, flexible, innovative. That's where we stand for. We do that on all our single platform. For the navigational side, that is Navi Trainer Professional, called Technological Simulator, TechSim, let's say, the abbreviation for the technical simulation. Both can be used for either training or R&D, and they can be used physical on-site on different devices, from full mission to desktop or even device mode, and of course in the cloud. We will try to reach the crew on board. That is our main vision, of course, as well. Anti-Pro platform, yeah, from the navigational side, what can we expect? Where are we? Physical on-site simulation, a lot of models per segment. Cloud-based simulation, as we said, self or instructor-led trainings by machine-learned navigational algorithms as input into the simulators. A lot of hardware in the loop and API simulator R&D integration capabilities, where we see a lot of usage of our simulators also coming forward, if it's in educational bodies or even in the commercial aspects. Realistic traffic behavior, we've got a new feature, smart targets, really realistic traffic behavior to follow the rules, let's say, also driven by algorithms. Mixed reality, simulation, and smart realities. And the next generation of visualization and immersiveness. Where we're standing then from the technical side, the TechSim platform, we've got the latest modules for the LNG fuel bunkering, storage, and fuel gas supply systems integrated, but also for the methanol bunkering side and fuel supply. Ammonia still to be developed, but is already underway. So exciting times in the new technologies and platforms. What do we have then for that platform? Different models that actually align with the vision of the new technology and advancing ways into new fuels. So dual fuel systems as we had them, LNG carriers with membrane tanks, or dual fuel systems with LNG on deck, spherical tanks, for instance. The Wärtsilä engines in the W31 model, and of course lining up for the hybrid way, the new really vision of the powertrain. A lot of these LNG and new IGF compliant bunkering models and storage and fuel supply. From the online partner or on the e-tutor tool as well, bringing a lot of possibilities for automated exercises, as you see in different segments. We're giving the option to monitor performance and applying a lot of capabilities for assessments. Also for familiarization or for simplified tutorials, assessments, a lot of IGF compliant simulation going on already to make sure the LNG crew and also the methanol coming in on the MSC Circular 1621 to make sure they are compliant. Different components, different features, as we will see for each system and each fuel, of course. Other e-tutor exercises, electronic tutorials, let's say, the abbreviation for liquid cargo handling models and for IGF models, as you can see. A lot of stages that can be implemented and can be trained on. From the IGF component side, as you see here. From the LNG bunkering side, it was released 2022-23, and we've got the latest quarter now, expecting the methanol pack to be fully released, followed by the ammonia pack later in 2025. The good thing is that we are able with these new developments to already supply also towards the industry, bringing simulation more on the forefront, also from R&D perspective, as a part of the industrial revolution, as a predictive tool more. New developments and futures expected and learning objectives, within reach, as we said, bring that simulation as a more forefront tool. For instance, trading on methanol pack as newer systems. Again, what kind of learning objectives do you want to reach with the new systems? What kind of technologies are there, new or compared to what was not there before, not yet in LNG? Different components, fuel valve trains instead of gas valve units before the consumers. So also plunger pumps with a lot of maintenance. So why not bring in these e-tutor prompt messages to the students while they're running these exercises? Of course, complying to the regulations. Here you see some previews already from the methanol pack simulation that is ongoing, and simulated key features that can be expected. New systems, control on sealing oil unit, all to be aware of. And that knowledge needs to be brought, of course, to the new students and the new commercial sectors as well, the seafarers of the future. On the ammonia side, as we know, health aspect, a really important one. So input needed still, as we are learning from LNG and from the methanol introduction. We need the input from the industry, also from cross-industry, from tanker segment on the safety side, from the instructors and the users, of course, as well. That's why we often organize events and user conferences to get that input and to make sure we are developing and bringing the value of the tool as the platform, the model, and the right way of functionalities towards these simulator users. More, why not bringing in immersive knowledge sharing in a way that you can bring pop-up messages in the screens while running exercises? Why not a Mollier diagram about liquid to gas state on the LNG side, as we are already doing, bringing it further into the ammonia later on. We all know the bow tie modeling techniques, of course, for risk assessment. So why not use that as well and bring that further into the ammonia? Because ammonia release mitigation is a really important aspect for health preservation. Hybrid, a new way as well. Hybrid modes, zero emission. You've got the boost mode, cross-feeding, at port green, shore power, bringing in a lot of variations and possibilities. So we are a strong believer in this. That's why Wärtsilä has also really been in the forefront of the powertrain development with flexibility for new build vessels and a future readiness on engines. Hybrid, if it's hybrid mechanic with CPP plus LNG and ammonia, or if it's hybrid electric. Fuel cells, of course, the solid oxide fuel cells in the proton exchange membrane, low temperature, high temperature. We see a lot of development in that aspect as well. Wärtsilä is the hybrid way that Wärtsilä approaches these future developments on the powertrain with the flexibility for hybrid ways. Our way, how do we see the future forward with Wärtsilä in the decarbonization, digitalization, and education on the forefront, talking with our stakeholders and shareholders to make sure we are aligning for these new seafarers, to bring the current seafarers up to speed and up to level of the new technologies and knowledge. We have this as an obligation as well, as we are one of the simulation manufacturers, of course. But to bring that the future fuel technologies towards the customer and give that immersive experience, that's where really the focus is, with keeping the human centered. From human training, watchkeeping, of course. Expected more exercise packages online and exchange of that for semi-automated processes, for instance, for the new technologies and new fuels. Also, the fully immersive approach with the new generations to get them interested. The future roadmap, bringing tools and knowledge towards the users. Well, thank you for that, and I hope you enjoyed. I wish you all good luck with the new book release. And of course, we'll be, as Wärtsilä, promoting that as well within the industry. Thank you very much. Sander Klaassen from Wärtsilä Rotterdam. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Excellent. Grateful to Sander to take time and record his presentation for us. As I said, unfortunately, he's not with us to respond to any questions, but I do have a cunning plan. I have Captain Al Sayed with me, and together we will try to respond to any questions. Now, the first one which has come through, and we only have got about 20 minutes for this part of the webinar. The first one is about on-board, online, and simulator-based education. Will it be covered and welcomed by the next revision of STCW convention? So this is the first question that we have, and I think it covers a whole range. It talks about online education, and I think Tony mentioned about designing these programs, how difficult they are. So over to you, colleagues.
I think we start seeing solution for onboard simulation training by the VR. Some companies now are having systems which can be installed on board and can fulfill the requirements. And still the point which is not clear how they can work out with the internet and with the connection with the internet. So that is something still needs solution. However, there is a kind of experiment in that for the onboard training. However, getting that as a mandatory through the STCW, and of course, Professor Malik, it's a long process. We're still looking for the simulator to be mandatory in other competence and skills. It's not mandatory. It might be when appropriate or when it's available, which we are looking to move forward in that step. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would I be able to jump in?
Of course.
Sorry, Malik.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, so where I see the big growth is Section 114 of STCW's responsibility of companies. And that recognizes that, your training that you get at school is by definition generic training. It's to give you foundational skills and things to let you enter a workforce. But the place where you're going to go is going to be specific. It's going to have specific equipment, specific operations, all kinds of things. And that's where I see the big growth with onboard simulation is to comply, let's say, with SOLAS, like for drills. It's just an alternate way of doing drills. But it is a competency that has to be developed, but it's outside of STCW. It's actually over on the SOLAS side. And when you look at ISO actually just published a standard last year saying if you want to use simulation to do your LSA training that's required under the SOLAS convention, that here's the standards for using simulation. Same thing happened with the MODU code. They said for doing drills on board, you can use simulation, here's the standards. So I do think that's going to be the big growth in simulation is workplace training, post-graduation, to make sure that people got the skills to do their job.
Yeah, of course. Mariners, like others, we never stop learning. Even as senior officers, there is always something new for us to learn. And that is covered very well in the book, Jillian. I was very pleased to see that. Now, the next question is, what is the panel opinion on the expensive price of simulators for installation and also cloud-based teaching? As a current simulation instructor, I find the fees for equipment and time on cloud to be expensive. Do we expect these prices?
There's always the concern about the cost of training. I mean, all of us who've worked in training, we know everyone tries to cut down on the budget, and they sort of look at the training budget first without realizing that has an implication on every other aspect, as Tony just said. The simulation, the training, the continuous development, it is ingrained in all aspects of the industry. So I think the cost of the physical aspect of a simulator can be really quite prohibitive, especially if you're just starting up, which is where cloud-based can come in. Cloud tends to be based on a per hour access with a standard fee for maintaining access to that system. And I guess it comes down to the overall concern about cost. I believe as we get more and more online and more capability, there could be a reduction in the cloud. I'm not sure, but as we get more, it does tend to be market-based. So as more people are using it, then I think we're going to see a change. But there's also opportunities for alternative approaches. And I think I want to pass to and get Tony's input on this, because he's been doing some really great work within Newfoundland and with his tools that he's got available for cost-effective, just-in-time, very realistic training that supports all aspects of the maritime industry, not just that one element, which is you need to get a qualification and get a ticket. It's that ongoing access and supporting for safety. So maybe, Tony, I'm going to put you on the spot there, because I know you've been doing a fair bit of work on this.
Right. Okay. So I think what you're getting at is outside of, let's say, the initial training, but for most of the training you do in your career, 80% of all the training cost is travel. It's getting people to the place where the instructors are and the facilities are. We've had enormous success by making simulators very mobile, and not just cloud. They can just rent a unit and use it for a while, and that reduces the costs of the people paying for the training by 80%. So therefore, then they're not as, like, they've got more headroom, if you like, for paying for expert tuition. And the training, the value of the training then goes up, because it's actually a way for them to achieve their goal. But they're not spending all their time on Air Canada or, the Delta Hotel. They're actually sending it to the expert instructor.
Thank you. Ali, you had a point.
Yeah, thank you. So with regarding the cost of installation and how expensive the simulator system are, I think one of the core problem goes to the planning stage, where if the institution are planning to install such a system, they need to understand their market very well. So where is the market, and how they can fulfill the requirements of the industry around them. So for example, there is an institution who installed a 360 full mission simulation, including all the cargo and dangerous cargo simulations, and they don't have the market actually to do that. And one of the other main problems, they don't have the capacity from the instructors to deliver that. And I believe, and I want to highlight the point which Jillian mentioned in the book in point 1.7 about the role of instructor and the simulator staffing option, because one of the main issues the simulator institution are finding is they might have the best systems available, but they don't have the correct structure to run these systems, and it end up in that case. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Could I just end off with one last point? And that is, if you're concerned about the cost of the training or the cost of the simulator in training, consider the cost of an incident that could be avoided by having well-trained officers. So I think I'll just end off with that last one. If people are complaining and concerned about the cost of the training, think about the cost on the other end if something happens because they didn't do the training.
Jillian, thanks. Tony, this one is for you and you only. People are asking about feedback that they usually get from an instructor, and how with an automated system can provide similar sort of feedback. They want some assurance that the systems we are designing will be able to provide that sort of feedback.
Right. Okay. No, that's a great question. In fact, this is where, when you go from instructor-led systems to automated systems, that you absolutely have to have Jillian's book and more. Like, you have to have a very deep grounding in education theory. There's been a fair amount of research on the medical side, because they're doing the same thing. They're pushing the boundaries on simulation. And by looking into education theory, you can structure debriefs in advance and populate the information in your debrief from data collected from the system and present it in a way to the students so that they get a very targeted debrief on the things that they need to understand. It's very effective, but it takes a lot of work. You have to do what Jillian talks about. You have to go down to the micro description of what good is and what not good is. You have to be able to measure it. And the students have to be prepared in advance to know what good means and what good doesn't mean. So when they get the debrief, they can make sense of it. As you're getting more AI into the instructor stations on things, they're also being able to explain things in targeted ways for particular target groups. So for instance, North Americans might want to be spoken to in a certain way. Other people from other parts of the world might want to be spoken a certain way, and the machine adapts to that. But that's where that's going, and it is relatively new. Right now, it's only within the scope of the people who've got the expertise to do it. But my sense is that the tools are being developed, that it's going to be more in the reach of more people to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, one other point which has come up, and it came before the webinar, is the qualification and certification of instructors. At the moment, there are no requirements, and it's left to the flag states, the member state, to define that. So what is the future? Do you think the book and Nautical Institute have got a role to play here in terms of providing that assurance that these people have reached a level of confidence and competence to be instructors?
All right, thanks, Professor. Yes, let's be honest. We do have the model course, which specify some of the guidelines about the instructors, but unfortunately, at the end, it's a guideline. No one is, there is no obligation to follow these requirements regarding the instructors. If we go to the STCW regulation A112, in section A and B, there is no specific requirement actually for the training instructors. So that's a point from the legislation point of view. Within the industry, if we go to the Nautical Institute DP scheme, for example, there is a lot of requirements for the instructors to be able to teach in the simulator and DP courses. The book here defined that very well, and I think what we need now is to understand the level of competence and skills which needed for each task. So we don't need, for example, as Jillian said in her book, we don't need a core instructor for all courses, for all systems. We might need a field instructor with educational training, sometimes a field instructor with no educational training. So it depends on the task and on the situation itself. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could jump in, Malik.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the IMSF has recognized this as an issue for a long time, because the value proposition of simulators, especially in education and training, is not realized unless you have competent instructors. That's been mentioned already, right? So we do have within, it's a fairly small group, but we have within our group, a stream of activities which are about, educating the instructors in the institutions that are part of our group. But I will say is that, with the launching of the book, it has renewed my discussion with Jillian, because I do see that this is a broader coalition than, let's say, just the IMSF, who's pushing, for excellence in the use of maritime simulation. But can we join forces, with others who are on similar paths? And Jillian's book is a great launching pad. And I do think, like, if people are engaged with us, that's part of the story. And I think also being engaged with you is the other part.
If I may step in as well. So thank you, Tony, and Ali as well. I think the concept of the onion model for the simulator is actually that you always would have a core instructor who's got that educational theory. And then what you do is you bring other instructors in as required for the specific training that you do. So every time you use a simulator, and actually the first edition of this book had its roots in an article I wrote for Safety at Sea, probably back in the early 1990s. It was called Who's Training the Trainer? And that was my concern when I was looking at the maritime industry. And a lot of educators are very, very qualified master mariners or really, chief engineers, but they had no indication of educational theory. How do you transfer what's in your head to someone else's? You can't just open your mouth and sort of open up their head and hope all the knowledge will drop in. And I think that's where we need to ensure the simulator itself is seen as a tool. But the simulation is the activity, and it's the simulation instructor who's trained to use that tool to develop an activity to meet an objective that has that concept of that flow theory, if you like, the Mihai-Csikszentmihalyi, the flow theory, that you are constantly challenging the student, but not too much, so that they actually anchor that knowledge and they have that concept of discovery learning. I keep going back to Jean Piaget's quote because it's so true. If you have that ability to see what you need to know next, then you're actually going to anchor that knowledge. And I think that we really need to ensure. So Model Course 6.10, yeah, it's a great start, but we have to ensure that the instructors who are using these tools actually understand how to make best use of the tool. Like any tool we have in the industry, the simulator is just another tool. It's the instructor that's going to make it work.
Jillian, thank you very much. This one is for you again, Jillian. In the book, you covered the learning domains, the taxonomies that you put there, and most lecturers that I have worked with over the past many decades, they are good in terms of psychomotor and cognitive. When it comes to affective, they sort of fail because it's all to do with emotion and feelings. And how do you assess those things is a point. And you covered it well, but could you elaborate on that?
Certainly, yes. So the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor domains. And I think that's why it's really important to look again at the training taxonomies, those experts who have done work on this concept. And within the affective domain, we have a number of very specific objectives that you can meet. But as seafarers, we're very much in that can do, make it work, much more practical environment. But this whole concept of the affective domain or these more professional skills, they like to use the word soft skills. I don't like that word because it's not soft at all. They're very difficult. But that concept of affective domain. And I think I can come on because we have a really bit of exciting news about a future book that is coming from the Nautical Institute. And correct me if I'm wrong there, Makita, you probably want to do a little note on that, do you? Makita, you are still muted.
I can see that Makita is back. I think she's keeping...
Yeah, okay. I will do a bit of a push for this. Okay,
Yes.
there she is. Yeah, go for it, Makita.
Yes, Jillian. Well noted.
And those colleagues who post questions, I'm really sorry we haven't had time to go through them. What we will do is that we will sit down and classify these, and hopefully we will put an article in the surveys from some of us responding to those issues.
Thank you, Malik, and thank you to our speakers who've touched on so many topics covered in the Simulation Instructor's Handbook, now in its second installment. Really appreciate all your contributions. And to our audience, we did have some minor technical problems. So if you've experienced any of those, our sincerest apologies for this today. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Jillian Carson-Jackson, our author of this title. This webinar marks the official launch of the second edition of a Simulation Instructor's Handbook. In closing, I'd like to encourage you to visit our website to find out more about our membership and how you may be able to join any one of our 6-day branches around the world. You could also stay tuned for upcoming webinars and other Nautical Institute events by visiting our events page. Thank you and have a lovely day. See you next time.